Hi guys, today I'm creating a layout making some homemade embellishments using the Let Me Go kit and the stamp set in particular in the Let Me Go kit. So I'm just having a look at the kit here and figuring out what pieces of the kit I might use. Here I'm having a look at the stamp set that coordinate with the kit. I'm going to show you some of the ones that I'm going to be using, those banners with the phrases that fit inside. And while I'm at it, I'm just having a look at what other things I might want to use, and I'm putting them all in the glass tray just to set them aside as potential embellishments for this layout. So I'm using some photos that have some lighter colors in them. And I do want to use the typewriter and the camera there that come on the pics. And my photos do have some lighter colors than some of the other photos that I've scrapbooked with using this kit. So I'm trying to pick out some of the, I guess, more pastel-y type of colors from the kit. And basically what I'm going to do for this layout is I'm going to make 4 small layouts and set them in the 4 quadrants of this beige background paper. It's a cream colored background paper and it has little flecks in it, so it looks really interesting and natural. I'm just setting out my 4 quadrants with pieces of transparency from Studio Calico that came in the kit as sort of the base, and then I'm going to go from there. And so before I get started, I'm going to make up my title because I knew I wanted to use these letters from Fancy Pants that came in the kit to make the title, and the title is going to go in the very center of the page, and then the 4 mini layouts are going to go in the 4 quadrants of the page. So I'm just going to use these letter stickers to spell out the words, the phrase, the Banksfords take on Pinterest. And I'm going to put the Banksfords in these small and take on in these small words. And for a second there, I thought I was going to make the word the in yellow, so I did spell that out, but I'm going to go back and change that to pink. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to spell out my title here, and the word Banksford is a bit of a nickname that our family has. It's a combination of my last name and my husband's last name, and some friends of ours gave it to us a number of years ago when we were first married. I think it was before we even had the kids, and it has stuck, and I think the majority of our friends now think of us as the Banksfords, which is kind of nice because I do have a different last name than my kids because I didn't take my husband's last name when we got married, so it's nice to be able to refer to us as one name, I think. These letter stickers, the pink ones on this Fancy Pants letter sticker sheet, are a little bit difficult to use just because there's some of the letters in the pink set are not quite cut through properly, and I'm not sure if it's just my set that is like that, but it's not uncommon for that to happen on a set of letter stickers. And so what I do when I'm working with stickers like that is I just make sure that I have my precision scissors handy so that I can trim up any little bits that are not in the right place for those letters. And as you see, a really handy tool to use for using these tiny little letters is a paper piercer that you can just poke out the centers of the O's and A's and those sorts of things. And then in the case of stickers that are a little bit stubborn about coming off the sheet, then just having your precision scissors like this just to cut a nice clean edge can be really, really helpful. I have lots of Fancy Pants letter stickers in my stash, and this is the only set that does this, so it might be just a little bit of a fluke. So there I have the main part of my title here that says the Banksfords take on, and now I'm just going to use these Beanboard Alphas by Jelly Bean Soup to spell out the word Pinterest, and it's going to take me quite a while here to find the small I. I find lots and lots of big I's or L's in this pack, but I can't find the lowercase I, so it's going to take me a while here. So bear with me. I absolutely love these chipboard letters. The only problem with them is that you do have to kind of dump them out and search through them, as opposed to the ones that are adhesive and come on a backing, because then they're typically in alphabetical order and it's a little bit easier to find the letters that you're looking for. but it's worth the extra work. Oops, I forgot an E there. I'll find it in a second. I think I'm actually looking it up to make sure there is an E in Pinterest. I don't know why I didn't realize that, but there is, of course. It's Pinterest, like interest. So I'm just going to mark out the words that the letters that I have used out of this package so that I don't go to try to make a phrase and find out that I don't have the proper letters for it. And one of my subscribers on YouTube actually gave me that idea, and it's a really great one. So I sometimes do that with sticker books too. The Amy Tangerine ones that have the stickers all on the very back page. You can see them all in small, but I had never thought of doing it for letter stickers. So thanks for that tip. So now I just went online and got a Pin It logo and printed it up in the middle of my 4x6 photo paper. And I'm going to just use my trimmer here to trim it down into a strip, and then I'm going to use my scissors to cut it into a little banner. Just putting some little fishtails on it. And that's going to be one of my embellishments for one of my first layout, because that's the pin right there. That's the pretty version of the cake, the one on Pinterest. And I just thought that it would be a fun project to do with the kids because it looked pretty easy. Just kind of frost the cake in chocolate and then put a bunch of lines on it with your piping frosting bag. And so I thought that would be pretty easy to do. It turns out I didn't have quite the right kind of frosting, so my little sticks for the nest didn't look quite like sticks, but it did look like a messy bird's nest, and that's all that really matters. And we had a lot of fun. And it was a really great project for a little kid to work on because you don't have to master any frosting skills for making like little flowers or piping or anything like that. So I really liked it. So I'm just going into some of the papers that are in the kit to make a couple of little strips of paper here that I can use for layers. And I wanted to use, I had done some hole punching on some of these papers for a previous layout, and I really wanted to use some of those punched pieces just because it adds so much dimension and just another shape to your little mini layout. And where these are mini, I didn't want to clutter them up too much with other things, so I thought I'd get some added interest just by adding some of the negative space images from the punches, and that would be a way to add interest without having to layer another thing on there. So I'm just taking a couple of pieces of paper to use as bases, and each of these layouts, these mini layouts, also has a square cut from one of those Studio Calico transparency sheets that came in the kit. So, and I'm trying to repeat the elements so that each of those has one of those as its base, and then a couple of pieces of pattern paper. And I'm trying to vary it a little bit but still double up so that there is some repetition among them. I don't want 8 different pattern papers, so instead I'm using I guess 4 or 5 different pattern papers, and I'm repeating some of them on some of the elements more than once. And that will just help it to, have an interesting look but not so overwhelming as having 8 different patterns on it. And I'm literally treating each of these as a little mini layout, and I'm just mindful of repeating some elements across each of these layouts. So I really love that bottom one. I love how the circles kind of end in the middle of the page, so I just trimmed off the end of the other one just to have that circle end in the middle as well. The pattern papers in this kit were so pretty, and some of them were really, really bold. So I tried to not put too bold patterns together either. So the chevron on this one I'm working on right now is fairly bold, and then the other chevron on the one in the opposite diagonal corner is also quite bold. So I didn't put those both on the same layout, on the same mini layout. And so this is basically how the layout is going to look, and I'm gonna I'm going to staple this pin it banner on there. And I have a couple more things to do before I start working on the embellishments that I'm going to make using the stamp set. And this is the stamp set that was designed to coordinate with the Let Me Go kit. And it didn't actually come with the kit. I might have said that at the beginning of this narration, but it goes with the kit, but you do have to buy it separately. And so I love getting the coordinating stamp sets because they often have elements that coordinate with some of the other elements that come in the kit, whether it's similar shapes or if it's phrases that go along with the theme of the kit or with some of the pattern paper in the kit. A lot of times, because they are designed by Caitlin Schaefer, the stamp sets that come in the kits will have similar designs to the Ormolu cut-aparts that come in the kit. So I want to have a piece of this Fancy Pants ephemera in each of my layouts here. Again, that's just kind of to make it be consistent and have a cohesive feel to these layouts. And so I'm struggling with where I'm going to put a Fancy Pants element on this first one. And that ampersand works well there, but I'm not going to end up doing that. So the Fancy Pants ephemera all have, and also the pic is also from Fancy Pants, so the one with the photo and the star behind it. And they all have a really similar feel. They're on a similar textured paper and they have similar colors and just kind of like the same graphic feel to them. So that's why I want to have one on each of the elements. So I've slowed this part down to twice the speed instead of 4 times, just so that you can hear a little bit more detail in how I'm going to go about making these. So what I have here are some scrap pieces of cardstock in some of the colors that coordinate with the papers. So I have this colorful paper that is in my layout already, and then I have that floral greenish paper that's also in the layout already, and then I've chosen a couple of pieces of cardstock, although that orange one is actually pattern paper, but it's a solid. So basically I'm looking for solids that's going to coordinate with this. These all happen to be Stampin' Up! Scraps, but they could be scraps from your scrap bin or from another layout that used this kit. What I really like about the Stampin' Up! Cardstock is that it does have inks that coordinate with it, so if you want to do a tone-on-tone type of look, you can do that. And so I'm picking out some of my inks, and Stampin' Up! Is my favorite ink to use with the stamps, just because I find that they give me a really crisp image. And of all of the brands that I've tried, which I by all means have not tried all of the brands, but I've tried several brands of ink, and I find that the Stampin' Up! Is really the crispest. So what I'm looking for here are some tone-on-tone inks, so that I have the option of doing some tone-on-tone stamping, but I also have that gray pulled out because I know that some of these colors are going to be too dark for tone-on-tone stamping to really look good in. So the Island Indigo, for example, I'm suspecting might not look so good in that it might not be as readable. And I know I'm going to be doing phrases because there are phrases in this stamp set. So I picked out the gray, which is called Basic Gray for Stampin' Up!, as well as some colors of ink. Hang on, I'll go get the inks and let you know the colors that I'm using. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each mini layout and then I'm going to make a couple of banner embellishments to coordinate with it. And the colors of ink that I'm using by Stampin' Up! Are Basic Gray, Island Indigo, and I also have Island Indigo paper there, and those are the colors that I'm pulling out right now is the Island Indigo. Then I also have Coastal Cabana, is that greenish colored ink, and I also have the Coastal Cabana paper. And then the orange that I have pulled is Pumpkin Pie, and that's a patterned paper orange there that I think it is Pumpkin Pie. And then the pink that I have is Strawberry Slush, which is one of the in colors for this year. So I'm going to experiment with a bunch of different looks here just to see what I want to put together. So one option with these stamps that coordinate with one another is to stamp a solid in a color and a solid banner in the color there, which I just stamped in the Island Indigo, which is really too dark, so I'm using two colors that are too dark here, but you need to kind of experiment with it to find out what's going to work for you. So I'm immediately recognizing that there's no phrase that's going to show up on that one. So I'm going to anyways have a look at the frame that goes with this. And because they cram so many stamps into the stamp set, sometimes they are still attached to one another and they haven't cut properly. So you just take your little scissors and cut them apart, and it's no harm is done to the stamps themselves. And so what I did there was I changed my mind and decided that I would stamp the outline of the banner instead of the solid banner. And then I'm going to use my gray just to see how it looks to layer two stamps there. And I actually didn't do a great job of lining them up, but I do like the look of the gray over top of the Island Indigo, but it's just going to be too dark and heavy for the layout that I have going on, so I'm not going to use that. Instead, I'm going to use the blue ink outline of the banner, and then I'm going to use the same blue ink. I'm pretty sure that's the blue one there. Yeah, it is. So that's Island Indigo, and I'm going to stamp my phrase, and I'm just using a portion of the phrase because the phrase that I'm using is not one that was meant to go on the banner, but it was included in the stamp set. And so I'm just going to break this phrase into two pieces. You could cut your stamp, but I didn't want to do that. I don't usually do that. I just selectively ink it when I'm going to break my phrase into two pieces. So see how I'm just inking the good idea part of this one. I'm just making sure that it's really inked up because I should have re-inked this pad before I started this project, so it's really not inked very well. So I have to be extra careful that I've inked it all up before I do my stamping. So here I have two banners that are using the outline stamp, the outline banner stamp, and then two different parts of a phrase stamp that are stamped separately. And I really like that look, but I realized after I stamped it that I probably don't want two banners that are exactly the same together. So now I'm going to stamp another outline stamp, with this time with orange ink. So this is a tone on tone type of look, and I'm going to change this was such to orange instead of the blue. And when I do this, I always want the banner that I think is going to go on top to be the lighter color, because I personally don't like the look of having a darker color over a lighter color, just because the darker colors tend to have more weight to them, and so it can put your embellishment cluster off balance. So although I love tone-on-tone looks for stamping, I decided that this one is going to be just not enough contrast to do the orange ink on the orange paper. So I've changed my mind again, and again, this can take a bit of experimentation, but it's fun. Like, I really had a good time. I slowed myself down and didn't worry about how much time I was taking, and just had fun figuring out all different kinds of looks that I can put together. And I just really enjoyed it. So the last little letter there didn't come out quite as dark as I wanted it to, so I just went over it with a gray pen. So I think that this banner looks a little bit better with the gray, so I used the gray outline stamp and then the gray phrase stamp, and it was just part of the phrase stamp. Now I'm going to cut it out, and I find when I'm cutting out banners, I like to use my big scissors for the edges, and then I like to grab my little scissors to use for the little fishtails. My little scissors have a precision tip, so I can cut right to where I want to cut it, and it ends right where I know it's going to end. Whereas I like to use the big scissors for the long edges, because you can get it in one cut, as opposed to having to open and close your scissors a bunch of times. And the more you open and close your scissors, the more chances you have of going crooked. So again, just switching to my tiny scissors to cut the fishtails off of this banner. And now I have these two. The darker color is on the bottom, the lighter color is on the top, and there's enough contrast with them that you can, it has pretty good readability. And I'm doing all of my stamping on the back side of a mouse pad, and that just gives you a firm but still cushy, so it's got a little bit of give to it. A surface that's firm but still has a little bit of give will really ensure that you get a nice even stamped image and that there aren't any gaps in your stamped image. So here I'm using on the pink paper, which is strawberry slush paper, I am using pink ink. Again, I really want to go for that a tone on tone look, which I love so much, and it's part of the benefit of using stamps and papers that coordinate, but you could use any. Again, I changed my mind on this one and decided to switch over to the gray after I had a look at it. So sorry that my head gets in the way here. I think the reason I decided to change a good idea from the blue to the pink is because this particular layout, mini layout, is going to go in the top corner of my quadrants, and I didn't want something quite so heavy as that blue A Good Idea banner to be on one of the top quadrants. I wanted to save that color for one of the bottom quadrants. So although I really do love the orange and blue together, I think they look great together, I think that the overall layout is going to look better with pink up here. And I switched to pink with gray ink because it has a bit more readability, and it also coordinates better with the orange banner, which already has a color with the gray ink on it. So now I'm just going to figure out how I can get these two banners onto this layout. I already have a banner that says pin it, and I really wanted to use that triangle with the pointy finger, but it's not going to happen. I also really wanted to use the ampersand because that is one of those fancy pants elements that I wanted to bring into this quadrant, but I just couldn't get it to work. So I'm just going to use these banners, just these three banners lined up together as the main embellishments, and I'm also going to layer that thin strip of colorful pattern paper as well. So this is one of my favorite ways to attach banners, is to run a strip of regular adhesive down the center of it and then put small foam dots on either end of the banner, and that gives the banner a little bit of dimension and makes it look like an actual banner in that it gives it some movement and makes it look like it's a little bit bent. So there I put the strip of adhesive down the center, and then I'm using my 1/16 width foam dots to give just a little bit of lift to the two ends of my banner. And that is the top left-hand quadrant finished. So now I have the top right-hand quadrant here, and I'm going to put that ampersand there because that's where I wanted it to go from the beginning. I think it just really looks nice there in the bottom corner. And I love that picture because Sophie's face is all covered in chocolate, and it's really clear that she's been having a good time taste testing as she goes about making this cake with me. My other daughter, actually, I invited her to participate, and she was going to, but she ended up preferring to go out on the trampoline instead with Jen, who is who this cake was for. So just to kind of have a look at a couple of different looks here, I am just showing you that if you do a better job of outlining those stamps, layering those stamps together, you can come up with a really pretty look. That's not something that I did for this layout, it's just something I did to show that, you know, you could definitely use that banner on another project. It's just a little bit too heavy, and I really like the look of it with the black ink and the blue ink, and then the two different stamps that layer. So for this one, I am going to stamp an orange banner on orange paper. This gives you a very subtle look, but I really love it. Basically, when I cut this out, the outline is going to be a very light orange, and I think it's going to look great. So now I'm going to outline this by stamping the outline of the banner with gray. And excuse my head because I do have to get right over it to make it line up perfectly like that. And I absolutely love how this looks. I know I'm loving it already. And I want all of the banners to be slightly different from each other. So even though I'm using the same color that shows up in the first banner, because I'm using different inks, it's going to look different enough for me that they're all going to look unique. Now I'm just picking out a phrase to stamp on this. And I can't remember, it's the Sweet Little Moments phrase is the one that I picked. And I'm inking it in the gray, the basic gray. And so here we go, we've got a combination of two inks, the pumpkin pie ink and the basic gray ink, and 3 stamps used together here to create this little banner. So there's a phrase stamp, an outline banner stamp, and the solid banner stamp all used together. And it's a very subtle difference to have the light orange paper around the outside of this embellishment, but I think it's worth the extra work. So there it is. Oops, sorry about my head there. So now I'm going to put these together. I thought about outlining the ampersand, but because the banner is outlined, I don't want to do that. It'll just be too busy. So I'm going to raise the ampersand up off the layout a little bit by using some 1/16th inch pop dots. So the pop dots come in 2 different sizes. One is 1/16th of an inch, which are really, really narrow or thin, and one is 1/8 of an inch, which are a little bit, well, they're twice as thick. And so I like to use the small ones for the most part, and then I'll use the thicker ones just every once in a while for a little bit of extra lift. So again, I'm doing my standard way of attaching banners, which is to run a strip down the middle and then put the pop dots on either end for a tiny bit of lift. And voila, this one is done. I'm going to add an enamel dot, but I don't think I'm going to do that quite yet. So here is the bottom left-hand quadrant. And the reason I'm pulling these over as I do the embellishments is just so I can keep in mind the weight and colors that are already in this in this kind of cluster of a mini layout. And it helps me pick phrases and colors that work with the phrases and colors that are already in that little mini layout. So for this one, because I have a plan for what I'm going to do with this typewriter, basically I typed a little phrase on it with my real typewriter, and I just pulled a piece of 6x6 paper from what is that company called? Simple Stories, that's right. And I just typed my phrase so that it would fit within the lines of the typewriter, within the width of the typewriter. And then I cut it out so that it will fit. And I'm going to use my new Fiskars blade because my old Fiskars blade broke the last time I was using it. It was very, very old. It was from before I started scrapbooking. So I'm just cutting a very small slit in this typewriter embellishment that's just going to be big enough for me to slide a little piece of paper through. So it's like that. That's what it looks like. Recapping my blade so that I don't cut myself. And I'm going to use a couple of pop dots here. First, I'm going to use a piece of washi tape just to keep the bottom of the paper in place so it doesn't slide around while I'm trying to create this embellishment. And I want the paper to have a bit of curve to it, like a real piece of paper coming out of a typewriter would, because a real typewriter, of course, has a roller underneath of that paper, and this one doesn't. So I need to kind of recreate that look by using some pop dots. So these are the thicker kind of pop dots, and I'm doubling them up. So this is 1/4 of an inch of width of lift here that we have all together. So that's quite a lot of dimension here, but I really love how it looks. It looks like a real typewriter. And yeah, I'm just going to fiddle a little bit with the placement of it, and there we go. That was a lot of fun to make, and I like how it turned out. I've done that before on a card that I made, and using an October afternoon pattern paper from a couple of years ago. You might remember the one with a bunch of girls. I think it was the 9 to 5 collection. It had a bunch of girls on typewriters, and I made one of them into a real kind of message on the typewriter. So this little mini layout is coming along, but I do want to put another banner on this one because I want banners to be on each of them. So again, remember I had decided that that Island Indigo color was too dark to put on either of the top quadrants, so I'm going to make sure that I use it here on one of the bottom quadrants. So here I've just done some tone on tone stamping where I'm using Island Indigo ink for the outline of the banner stamp and also for the phrase, and I put it all on Island Indigo paper so that I have a tone on tone look for this banner. And it's a little bit lighter than if I had stamped the solid banner. So that's why I didn't go with that. I wanted to use just the cardstock color instead of the extra dark ink on top of the cardstock, if that makes any sense. So now I'm moving on to the final quadrant, which is the bottom right hand, which is the picture of Jen getting her cake. And I'm going to use these, I'm going to use 3 banners on this one, including this absolutely beautiful Coastal Cabana colored paper. I love, love, love it. I'm going to change my mind about this one, but you'll see a couple of different looks because I keep changing my mind. It just shows you guys a couple of different options on how to do things. So for now, I am doing gray ink on a pink background and gray ink on a Coastal Cabana background. And the phrase, "Love these memories," also done in the gray ink. And now this phrase is "Simply awesome," also done in the gray ink. I'm going to cut these out and move along before I realize that they're looking a little bit boring. Especially with them all being the same. It's kind of, you know, gray ink on a colored cardstock 3 times over. So what I've decided to do is use some of these solid banners because these are light enough colors that I can do that. So this Coastal Cabana is absolutely gorgeous, and I love how it's stamped. It looks almost like an ombre effect. It didn't stamp quite evenly, so it's a little bit lighter in places, and I really love that look. So then I outlined it with the gray just to give it that dimension and stamped the phrase in the gray. And here you're going to get to see the difference between that, just that extra lighter colored border around the edge of it after you cut it out really makes a big difference. Oh, I love that. These stamps are so much fun to work with. So this is going to be a fairly long video because I did slow down this process so that I could narrate through it with a little bit more detail. So I hope you guys don't mind every once in a while a little bit of a longer one. I try to keep them around the 20-minute length, but this one's going to be 45 by the looks of it by the time it's done. So another tone on tone stamping where I stamped using the Strawberry Slush solid banner, and now in Strawberry Slush and on Strawberry Slush paper, and now I am using gray for the hearts and gray for the frame around the banner. I'm going to cut it out. It just gives it a little bit more of a rich look and also a little bit more detailed. And it also gives it a little bit variety because the top and the bottom have the tone on tone look, and the middle one is just the single tone. So I attached that embellishment, that is the smile with the camera pic, and that is from Fancy Pants and came in the kit as well. Everything came in this kit except for the tiny piece of paper I used on the typewriter. And of course the scraps of cardstock that I just got from my scrap bin. So I'm going to stagger these banners so that they're not lined up the same way that the other ones are in the other layouts. Again, just for a little bit of variety, of variation in the look. Sticking some of those pop dots on either end again, and I have to contend with that pick too, right? So I'm just trying to make it so that they're all sitting nicely. There we go. Now normally I would like that pink one to be down just a smidgen so that it's not exactly overlapping with the paper, so that those lines are the same with the photo, so that those lines at the bottom aren't lined up like that. But once I stuck it down, I didn't want to pull it off because I thought I would rip the photo and I didn't want to start all over again, so I just left it. But usually I like my layers to kind of look layered over each other instead of lined up like that. So now I'm just going to finally attach this title, and I'm just trimming down the wax paper a little bit so that I can have a better look at how it's all going to line up and layer or not layer with the little mini layouts on this layout. And I'm just tidying up a little bit, I think. I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing here. Yes, I had to open up my bottle of glossy accents using my trusty little safety pin. I always keep a safety pin on hand because I needed to declog my glossy accents every time I use them. I find that once the bottle gets half full, that's when I have to start declogging it. For the first half of the life of the bottle, it usually, mine anyways, usually stays pretty clear, but the nozzle gets pretty clogged up once there's lots of air in the bottle. So I want this title to be not quite straight because my chances of getting it straight, if I were to try to get it straight, are pretty low because it's in the middle of the layout with nothing that's straight to use as a reference point. So I'm just purposely trying to make it a little bit skewed and scattered looking, just so that it looks like it's purposefully done that way instead of looking like it was an accident or a mistake. And this title may not be exactly centered, but that's okay because the 4 quadrants are not going to be exactly in the same place on each of the quadrants either. So I'm not going to fuss too much about the placement of this kind of stuff because I find that the effort and time that it takes me to make things look perfect is quite a lot, and it doesn't look perfect at the end anyways, so I might as well just kind of do my best to get it looking decent. And usually once you take in the overall layout, any little errors or misplaced things will either blend away once you look at the whole layout, or if they stand out, then I can try to fix them at the end when I have a better sense of the impact that they will have on the overall layout. So that's usually what I do in terms of, perfectionistic tendencies around scrapbooking. So basically, my thought process here is that if one of those layers touches the title, I need all of the layers to touch the title. So, or all of the mini layouts to touch the title. So I'm trying to make it so that they come close, but they don't touch it. And them being close kind of pulls them all together and the title holds them together, as opposed to them floating out a little bit too much. So here's where my problem is, which is that aesthetically I prefer this one to be down a little bit further, but I don't want it to layer over I don't even want the transparent parts to layer over the B in the Banksfords part of the title. So I just smudged it up a little tiny bit, like I just scooched it up a bit. It's a little bit higher than I would want it to be, but it keeps it from layering over the title, which is important to me at this moment. So here I have pulled out some of these chipboard stars from the kit, and the kit didn't come with a full set of the chipboard stars, but there was also a partial set of chipboard stars in the This Life Noted kit. And so I dug into my This Life Noted kit to grab a couple of extras. And here what I'm doing is I'm going to cheat a little tiny bit, and I'm taking a star from one of my This Life Noted little cards. And so I put, because I wanted to have 3 stars on each little mini layout, but I had already used a star here. So what I'm doing is I'm replacing it with a wood veneer star, and then I'm coloring it gray so that it still looks pretty much the same as it did when it was one of those chipboard stars. So again, sometimes you can be creative, and I don't hesitate from robbing from another layout to get the look that I'm looking for on this one, just because who wants to kind of stop your project and go to the store and buy another package of something, right? I'd rather work with what I have, and I don't often do that. I don't often go on to another layout and tear things off. I think that this might actually be the very first time I've ever done this, but in this case, I knew I had used one of those stars somewhere, and I knew that it wasn't essential that it be that particular star in that place. Whereas if I had replaced one of these stars with a wood veneer colored gray, it would have looked really obvious that I ran out of stars. So because the place that I took it off of, it was only 1 star on that layout, it's not going to look obvious that I did a little switcheroo. So the last thing I'm going to do is pick out a couple of enamel dots here, these gold enamel dots, and I'm going to put one on each of the mini layouts. I'm trying to vary where they're at, so they're not always in the same spot. So that's why one of them is not on a banner. And the Pin It banner was looking a little stark and a little out of place compared to everything else on the layout. It is one of the few pure white elements, so I just outlined it to make it look a little bit more like it fit. I'm thinking about using that camera, but it's too many cameras, and it doesn't really, again, I'm trying so hard to get one of those fancy pants elements on that layout right there, on that mini layout up in the top left-hand corner, but it's not going to work, and I don't want to cover that partial circle that's hiding under the banners. So I thought about using these puffy hearts, but they're too large to use at this phase. I would have had to have incorporated it much earlier if I wanted to. So now you're going to see some of the close-ups of these 4 mini layouts and how the banners look. And I love those chipboard elements from Studio Calico, the little basic shapes that they sell in chipboard pieces now. I just absolutely love them. They're great for sprinkling on at the end to just add a little bit of extra, especially the stars are so dynamic, so it adds energy to the layout. They're really fun. I had so much fun making little embellishments, from the typewriter with the little piece of paper sticking out of it to all of those banners that are personalized and the exact colors that I wanted them to be. I just had a lot of fun with this layout. But I'm feeling like the title is a little bit bland. So I'm going to pull out my sewing machine here in a second, and you'll get to see me try to do a bit of sewing over. I'm going to just sew over Pinterest and realize that my my thread tension is not right, and this sewing machine keeps going off in terms of the tension. I can't get it's already on the lowest tension and it needs to be lower. So I just went over to my large sewing machine, which is off screen. It's big and heavy and hard to drag into videotape, so I just went off screen to do my sewing. And this is the thing that I do so that my stitching doesn't get pulled out when I'm moving this layout around. This layout will be out and about for a month before it gets put into a scrapbook, and I don't want the stitching to come loose, so I just add some washi tape on the back, and that's in place of back stitching, because I don't like to back stitch most of the time on my paper layouts because it looks a little, it just changes the look. It looks fine, but it's just not the look that I wanted for this one. So now this is it. So now you'll get to look at a couple of pictures of the layouts and leave me a comment or question if you've got anything to say. And otherwise, I hope you all have a really great scrappy week.